Hey everybody, John Fenn here, Church Without Walls International, CWOWI.org. We're a worldwide house church network. It's all about discipleship, and our practice is as the early church, as they did historically, which is rotating homes when possible and rotating who leads as possible. So not just a miniature of the auditorium, but actually gathering in homes. Usually there's food, there's fellowship. We take turns on who leads each meeting and rotate homes. And that way everybody shares, everybody rises in their ability to share what's on their heart, what Christ in them is doing in their lives. And anyway, visit our website. You can sign up for my weekly thoughts and my monthly e-newsletter. It's in those, the content of those, my weekly Friday morning teachings called Weekly Thoughts and newsletters. That's where we put prophetic things, our conferences, our Zoom meetings, things of that nature. So sign up for that. You can find all sorts of things about house church and house church dynamics and everything at our website, CWOWI.org. All right, today talking about the sin of presumption. What is presumption? In a single sentence, presumption is thinking something is God's responsibility when in fact it is your responsibility. That's the sin of presumption. There are different sins of presumption in Scripture. One of the best is Numbers chapter 14, where the Lord had told Israel after 10 times of resisting him and testing him and everything else, he finally said, fine, I will give you what you have spoken in my ears, what you said you wanted to do, which was to die in the wilderness, so you can do all that. Well, the people, upon hearing that, said, oh no, we've done wrong, let's go into the promised land. And they gathered a group of people and they tried to go in to take the promised land. And Moses said, no, don't go. God's already, stated his will, but they went ahead and they were soundly defeated. Why is that? They thought something was God's responsibility, that he would take care of the enemy once they actually obeyed. In modern days, it goes like this. I'll give you several examples. One is, for instance, let me say this. The Lord told Adam that he would have to plant, he would have to farm, he would have to tend the earth. It would be by the sweat of his brow that he would live. Paul said in the New Testament, if you don't work, you don't eat. After Noah got out of the ark, the Lord delegated several things to Noah, and one of those was you can eat meat. You're going to have to chase it down, and I'm going to make it fair. I'm going to make them afraid of you. But it's up to you. You can do that now. And so there are things that God has given over to us. He doesn't tell us when to eat, when to use the bathroom, when to take a bath, et cetera, that's within our responsibility. And the tendency from some Christians is to spiritualize everything. And when they don't want to deal with something, or when they're afraid of something, then they will spiritualize it and say, well, we just need to pray about it. We don't need to take action. We need to pray about it. And that oftentimes is the sin of presumption. An example, let's say you've got a family living in a cramped apartment, mom, dad, 3 or 4 kids, or whatever the case is, and they desperately want to leave, but they think it's going to be God's responsibility to do the homework, to check out and see what the possibilities are for home ownership or a larger apartment or flat, things of that nature. And so they will just go on for days and weeks and months and sometimes years and think, God's not moving us yet. God's not leading us to move. It's like, that's your responsibility where you live. And so if you want to move, what you do is you gather information in the natural, you do what is right in the natural, and then you ask the Lord, saying, okay, this is what's on our heart. This is what we're thinking about, place in the country, et cetera, et cetera. Another example, and perhaps more common in my emails, are people who will say, pray for me, and they'll cite a medical condition. And we'll have an exchange of emails often, and I'll say, how often have you had this condition? And they'll say, days, weeks, months, whatever the case is. And they'll say, could you pray about it? I don't have health insurance. Or sometimes they'll just admit, I'm afraid of what they'll find. And so they want to pray about it. They want somebody to lay hands on them and take it all away. But our bodies are our bodies, and we have a responsibility to do what's right in the natural first. What I do is I take stock of that. I what Ephesians chapter 6 says, having done all to stand. Have I done all? That's my question. Have I done what's I need to do? Years ago, and both parties are in heaven now, so I'm not telling tales out of school. But years ago, we had a lady in our church when we were a small church in a rural setting. and she had a son, and this lady was very tight with money, and so much so that everything she did, she was afraid of things. And her son got sicker and sicker, and the fever stayed, and the fever lingered. And us and other people around in the church said, you've got to get your son to the doctor, because you don't want to mess with a virus. It could go to their heart. It could go, it could be more serious. And he just stayed with this fever, and it was very serious. I mean, everybody knew the consequences, but she said, but you know what? I'm afraid I don't, it's expensive to go to the doctor. They're going to charge us, just to go in, and I don't want this to be for nothing. Let's lay hands on him, and, it'll go away. Well, the rule of thumb that we always used when our kids were young was, we'll lay hands on you, and if you're not 100% better or showing dramatic signs of improvement within 24 hours, you're going to the doctor. We don't make our children suffer because we are, quote unquote, standing in faith. You don't make other people suffer for that. And so anyway, finally, after things got desperate, and the boy was taken by ambulance, and it turns out that, in fact, the virus had gone to his heart valve, and he had to have open heart surgery. And so back then it was like $65,000 for the surgery. Today it'd be probably 3 times that. But again, what happened was, she was amazed because he was a youngster. There were scholarships, there were grants and everything else, and they ended up paying nothing but maybe $100 or something like that for all his care. And she reflected on her sin against her son, and realized that she had been in presumption. And a lot of times people are like that. I don't want to go to the doctor because they're afraid of what the doctor will say, or they think the money, they're going to get charged an arm and a leg and do thousands of dollars of tests. Well, they may. But, when you move forward in Christ, when you do the right thing, then he makes provision. I've seen people do that, urged after, prayer hasn't healed them, laying on of hands for whatever reason. After 24 hours, they go to the doctor, they get grants, they get scholarship, they get, I don't know what the words are, taking where the care, where it's broken down to where they can afford it, or the bills are just completely absorbed in the benefits section of the hospital, or the benevolence section. Another area besides a home to live and health has to do with bill collections and stuff. Sometimes people will get behind in their bills, and they will say, oh, pray for me, I need this and I need that. And it's kind of like, well, have you talked to the people that you owe money to? No. They're afraid. And so they hide, they put faith out there. They think, what is faith? It's actually presumption. And they don't realize God will provide for you if you do the right thing. And so they will say, let's just pray about it. Let's just whatever. And so the bills pile up, 1 month behind, 2 months behind. Oh no, now we're facing cutoff. Now we're facing repossession. Now we're facing eviction. Now we're facing, well, did you talk to them at the beginning? Well, no. Why? If you get down to the nitty gritty, they were afraid, and they would much rather say, Father, take care of me, Lord, take care of me, than doing the right thing. Those are sins of presumption. And what you'll find is, if you will go through that fear and do what is right, the Lord will make the way for you. He will provide for you. I've seen it over and over and over again. So anyway, the sins of presumption. A sin of presumption is thinking something is God's responsibility when it's in fact your responsibility. When Jesus healed in Mark chapter 3, I think it is, and the man, yes, Mark 3, 1 through 6, the man with the withered arm, he said, stretch forth your arm. Jesus didn't take his arm and stretch it out for him. He said, stretch forth your arm, and the arm was restored. To the lame man, he said, take up your bed and walk. Jesus didn't do it for him. He said, you take up your bed and walk. There are certain things that we have to do to get the provision. I've shared before many times about how Jesus, before he fed the 5,000, and again before he fed the 4,000, Luke's gospel, Mark's gospel tells us that he made them sit down in groups of 50s and 100s. Jesus organized. He did what was right in the natural so that the blessing could flow in an organized and efficient fashion. Folks, don't be presumptuous and just think God's going to pour it out on you. And you can hide fear. You can hide your fear. You can hide your worry behind quote unquote faith. That's not it at all. Always do what is right in the natural first. If you lay hands on yourself or lay hands on somebody, and it's not an emergency situation I'm talking about, but and within 24 hours you're not better, you need to consider talking to that person, drawing up a list on your own, making an appointment, whatever you need to do what's right in the natural. And if you do what's right in the natural, the Lord promises he will take care of your need. He will supply all your need according to his riches and glory, but you have to do the right thing. All right, God bless. Hope this has been a blessing to you. CWOWI.org.